So we just reviewed circles at the beginning of this week, and now we're going to move to cylinders. So again, we're on page 309 or just in a blank spot in a notebook. And if you haven't already done so, please write the formula to find the surface area of a cylinder down. And I just want to point out that, again, cylinders are made up of essentially three shapes. So we have our rectangle that wraps around, it's called the lateral area, and then we have the circle on the top and the bottom that are normally the same size. I gave you quite a few examples of cylinders in real life, and we'll be using some of these today. So if you flip to page 310, you'll see our first problem. It says, what is the surface area of the cylinder? Use 3.14 for pi. Round your answer to the nearest square inch. The first thing we want to notice is that here, this circle, we are not given the radius, r. So when we go to plug in the number for r, we would not be plugging in the number 20. We're given the diameter, but good thing for us is that if we just cut this diameter in half, we get the radius. So the first thing you're going to want to do is divide this 20 by 2 and get 10 for the radius. So everywhere we see r, we're going to be writing the number 10. Next thing we want to notice is that here it says in the problem to use 3.14 for pi. Remember that 3.14 is rounded number for pi. Pi goes on and on forever. So 3.14 is just the abbreviated version. So we're going to notice also that the height here is 15 inches. So all we're going to do right now is take the two stays, pi 3.14, 10 goes in for r, 15 goes in for h. We're going to add, and again we have our 2 pi r squared. Remember that this part of your formula represents those two circles. So the first part, just our lateral area or our rectangle, we'd be getting 2 times 3.14 times 10 times 15. Remembering that this is r radius, this is h 15 or h height. The second part represents our two circles, one on the top, one on the bottom. So that's what this 2 represents. There's two circles, both pi r squared, so 3.14 r squared, so 10 squared. And I found this really cool feature. Well, I don't know if it's really cool. It's cool to me, but if you just Google calculator and you type in this entire thing, the Google calculator does order of operations for you. So I thought I'd show you in case you don't have a scientific calculator. So I'm just going to do 2 times 3.14 times 10. I'm just typing this in, times 15. And then I change to plus 2 times 3.14 times, and this is where I'm sure you know how to do all of this, but if you don't know how to do exponents, you're going to click this button right here, 10 to the power of 2, or 10 squared. And it's so cool because if we just type this into a regular 4-function calculator, it's going to give us something totally different, but this calculator does do order of operations. So we press equals and we get 1570, so 1,570. If we go back over here, we want to make sure we always include our units. So since we are talking about area, we're going to write 1,570 inches squared for this case. And we move on to page 311. You plan to stain the outside of a cylindrical wooden table. You do not plan to stain the bottom. Okay, that is a very important point of this. So I would like everyone to highlight, circle, underline. You do not plan to stain the bottom. Every year, students ask me this question, why is my answer wrong? Why is my answer wrong? If you're doing your homework and they are asking you for an open cylinder, everyone go ahead and write open cylinder, your formula for the surface area of a cylinder changes. So what does it change to? We're going to write a new formula for open cylinder. And it is right here. So What changed? Surface area equals 2 pi RH. That didn't change. What did change is that this 2 on the second part of our formula went away. What does that mean? That means that we are only accounting for one of the circles on our cylinder. We're going to take off one of them. In this case, we're taking off the bottom, but in a lot of cases, we take off the top. We're talking about cups. They don't have a top, so you take that part out of the equation. Okay. Next thing I want to point out, popped up a little soon, but that's okay. Right here, when we go to substitute in our numbers, we have H, height, is 25.75. Again, we're not given the radius, we're given the diameter. So what do? We divide our given diameter by 2, and we get 6.25. So when we substitute the two r's, we are not going to be writing 12.5, we're going to be writing 6.25. Okay, so let's go ahead and write that. And this is a long one, I believe. Yeah. So there's lots of decimals, so it came out a little strings across the page. So we have 2 times 3.14, again, goes in for pi. The r, 6.25. The h, 25.75. Remember to remove the 2 that usually goes here because we're talking about an open cylinder. We're taking the top, or in this case, the bottom, out of the formula, times 3.14 times 6.25 squared. Go ahead and type that into your calculator and see what you get. Okay, and I went ahead and typed that into my calculator over here. I'm going to press equals, and we get sort of a larger number with some trailing decimals. So I'm going to go back to page 311 and see what it says. It says, to the nearest square inch, find the area. So if I'm putting this in, I'm going to do inches and then to the power of 2. But I need it to the nearest square inch. So I'm going to round to the nearest whole. Since this is a 3, I don't have to round this up to 4. So my answer is just going to be 1,133 inches cubed of staining. Okay, the last problem that we're going to do together is on page 312, the second one. Again, I've put the area formula here. If you have not written it down, then please do so. If a cylinder doesn't say that it's open, you can always assume that this 2 is here. So this just says find the surface area of the cylinder to the nearest tenth. Use 3.14 for pi. So this is a closed cylinder. We're going to assume that the 2 stays. What do we need to do about this 14? Because we're given the diameter, but again, in the formula for surface area, we don't use diameter, we use radius. So this here, 14, needs to be changed definitely to 7 feet. So when I go to write my formula, should look like this. So notice how it's 2, that stays, times 3.14 for pi, times 7, where did that 7 come from? That's the radius, times 3, that's the height, plus 2, it is a closed cylinder, times 3.14 times 7 squared. So again, you could type that whole thing into your calculator and you're going to get the surface area. So try it out. Flipping over here to my calculator, I just want to point out again how to do this 7 squared. When you're typing the 7, you just click this button and it sort of moves your cursor up to the exponents position. So I type my whole thing in, and I'm going to find the surface area of that cylinder. Okay, so we have 439.6. If I go back over here, I want to make sure I'm rounding to the nearest whatever they tell me. Okay, it's the nearest tenth, so I'm good. 439.6, I'm going to put feet squared because we are talking about surface area. Our units need to be squared at the end. Okay, so that is basically surface area of cylinders. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions. Otherwise, go ahead and do your assignment on Pearson.